Hey hockey fans, hey Kraken fans, welcome back to the channel. It's Mike here at Sasquatch NHL. Really excited to bring this update to you guys. I've been working on it for a little bit here. Finally back from family vacation and work and busy summer schedule, but it is good to be back, and I'm really excited, like I said, to bring this update. We're going to talk today. We're going to answer that question: can the Kraken make the playoffs in their second season as a franchise here in the 2022-2023 season? I also want to take a look around the Pacific Division and all the competition and everything that has happened to each roster within our division here with the Kraken, as well as take a deeper dive into the changes that the Kraken have made leading up to this point in the offseason. So, as the rule goes, I'm recording, so probably some breaking news going to happen here in the next couple of minutes, but that's all right. We'll try to update it as we go, and again, it's great to have you guys along. So again, we're going to take a look here where we're at with the Kraken roster, all the changes, what's it going to take to get into a playoff spot, who's gone, who's new, some of the key factors that I think that the Kraken will need to accomplish if they do want to be in the playoff picture. And again, we're going to swing around the Pacific Division, take a look at what our opponents did. We're going to take a look at the salary cap, and then of course I'm going to give you that prediction for the division rankings, where I think things are going to end up and whether or not the Kraken are going to make the playoffs. So again, thanks for dropping by, you guys. I do appreciate the support. If you want to hit that like button or subscribe button, it does help me grow the channel. I'm going to try to follow this up with a live stream in the next couple of nights. Would love to have you guys jump on, hit me in the chat, and tell me what your thoughts are as far as where the Kraken are at going into Season 2 and how you see the Pacific Division shaping up. In the meantime, if you guys want to leave a comment on this video, give me your Pacific Division predictions, top to bottom, who's going to make the playoffs, who's going to win the division, who's going to get in with the wild card positioning. Would love to hear from you. So we don't want to waste any more time. Let's get into today's update. We're going to answer that question: can the Kraken make the playoffs? We're going to take a look at their roster, and we're going to swing around the Pacific Division and look at all the changes that have happened up to now. So the first thing I want to do is look at the Seattle Kraken changes: who's in, who's out, who's new, who's back, who's been re-signed, etc. And I think the focus this offseason has really been adding that goal-scoring punch. I think going into the offseason, I thought a lot of us felt like we really needed to fix the defense a little bit, and obviously the goaltending is going to need to be better. But I think those things are going to slowly change over time, and Ron Francis is really trying to target goal-scoring right out of the gate here in Season 2. So let's go through the transactions here for the Kraken in the offseason. Of course, everything started with that huge first-round pick of Shane Wright. Ends up in Ron Francis's lap, and he just scoops him up. It's going to be really exciting to watch this kid develop. I believe he's going to be in the lineup day one for the Kraken. To improve his development experience, I'm sure he's going to be rotating in and out, maybe playing some lower line minutes. We'll just have to see how things go, but who knows, he may not be on the opening night roster. But I do believe he's going to be up with the big club this year. I think he's an NHL-ready player, and sending him back to the OHL doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So great to have Shane Wright along the way here with Matty Beniers and a lot of the other young players for the Kraken as we go into the future. The next thing there, we had Carson Kuhlman. He's going to be back with an $825,000 contract. He signed a one-year deal there. And then the big news came: Andrei Burakovsky coming over from the Colorado Avalanche. He's a Stanley Cup winner now, so that's going to bolster the scoring. We're going to talk a little bit more about what he brings to the table here after we get through the transactions. Really excited to have him on board. Of course, with Chris Driedger going down, the Kraken needed to solidify their positioning in goaltender. Ron Francis made it obvious up front that he was going to target a goalie in free agency, and maybe he'll split time with Joey Daccord coming up and down from the minor league affiliate. We'll just have to see how that goes. But they bring in Martin Jones. He's played for Philadelphia and probably more notably for San Jose in the past. He had some great early years there with the Sharks, fell off a bit as his tenure reached an end there in San Jose, and then he rebounded a little bit in Philly. So definitely, in my opinion, a serviceable backup for the Kraken as we go through Season 2 and kind of waiting for Driedger to get healthy again. Next up was Justin Schultz there. He signed a 2-year, $6 million deal with the Kraken. And that's Ron Francis bolstering the defensive depth a little bit. There was a hole there as far as needing to plug a guy in, and so Justin Schultz is going to be that guy, I believe. And then you've got another depth forward signing, John Hayden, a tough and tumble center there. He signed a 2-way contract, a 1-year deal. So he's going to bring some grit and some toughness to the lineup. I don't think he'll be in the lineup every night, but he's a guy you can pencil in here and there when the matchup requires it. Next up, there is Cole Lind. He penned a 1-year, 2-way contract with Seattle, and he's kind of going into a prove-it year. You're just going to see a few of these contracts where I think Ron Francis is saying, all right, let's see what you have to offer this year, and we'll go from there. Of course, then the huge news broke. Oliver Bjorkstrand from the Columbus Blue Jackets. All we had to give up was a 2023 third-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick to get him. That's the Kraken weaponizing their cap space, as we've talked about on Twitter and some of the other reports discussing that a little bit more in depth. So it's great to see the Kraken with that cap space and going out and using it, bringing in a pretty hefty goal scorer there and bolstering the offense. So we'll talk a little bit more about the Bjorkstrand trade and him coming over in just a second here. I wanted to get through the rest of the transactions that the Kraken made. Next up, we had Morgan Geekie sign a 1-year, $1.4 million deal there. Another kind of prove-it contract for him to see how things play out this year. Avoids going to arbitration, signs early, and probably a good outcome for both sides there on that contract. So we'll see what Morgan Geekie and the Geek Squad can bring to the table this year. I'm sure he's going to get plenty of opportunities to prove his worth. Next up, another depth signing of Michael Kempny there, a 1-year, $750K deal. I believe he's just going to add some more depth to the defense. Probably won't see him every night as well, but a good guy to have to bring into the rotation when you need to. And finally, everybody's favorite guy, got it done. Ryan Donato, he's going to be back with the Kraken on a 1-year deal, $1.2 million. We'll see how things go. Again, I think a lot of these 1-year deals are kind of prove-it contracts to see whether these guys are going to stick and be good fits with the organization moving forward or not. So it's great to have the Don Father, as they used to call him in San Jose, back with the Kraken. Can't wait to see number 9 flying around on the ice again this year. Really love watching him play. So before we keep rolling too far here, I kind of wanted to talk about the Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand maneuvers that Ron Francis was able to pull off here for the Kraken in the offseason. Bjorkstrand comes over for next to nothing in that trade, just 2 draft picks in 2023, a third-rounder and a fourth-rounder, and he's going to provide, along with Burakovsky, some much-needed scoring punch and creativity and finishing touch to the Kraken lineup. Really excited to see these guys play, and I think they're going to add that element that the Kraken were missing a little bit last year. I love seeing these JFresh hockey cards that they post on Twitter. If you don't follow already, it's at JFresh Hockey. They do a really good job of highlighting a player's strengths and weaknesses. This one in particular for Bjorkstrand, when that trade happened with Columbus, they're saying he's a play-driving, 2-way scorer who's one of those players who's good at pretty much everything. And you keep hearing this echoed over and over from people that have covered him closely in Columbus and analytics experts out there in the media. It's really exciting. He's going to bring some good forechecking and his shot creativity to the lineup. You can see his numbers there are pretty impressive. I think that he would also add a little bit of a bump to the Kraken power play, hopefully, because it wasn't so great last year. So we'll have to see how that develops. Again, 28 goal scorer for Columbus last year, led them in goals, and I cannot wait to see Oliver Bjorkstrand play in that Kraken sweater this fall. Burakovsky, of course, comes over at 5.5 per year. That's 5 years, so he's going to be with the Kraken for the foreseeable future. He's going to bring another great offensive element. Stanley Cup winner now with the Colorado Avalanche. One interesting report there from Micah Blake McCurdy at Ineffective Math on Twitter. He's a great 5-on-5 scorer, great finisher, but it didn't seem like, as far as what his research was, that he was helping a whole lot on the power play. But that might have to do with the fact that he was playing on the second power play unit in Colorado, and they didn't get as much time as the McKinnon line. So that may just be a matter of circumstance. So we'll have to see if he can add some additional elements on the power play to the Kraken as well. He is a great player and great finisher, like we've talked about. You can see the JFresh hockey card there for him as well. It's a 5-year deal, $5.5 million for Seattle. He's an efficient sniper whose production in third-line minutes with the Avs has been consistently impressive. Exactly the kind of player Seattle needs, but also the kind that could get wrecked by Hackstall's system, according to JFresh. So we've talked about this a little bit here and there in the live streams and some of the other updates. This is definitely going to be a prove-it year, not only for some of the guys on those 1-year deals, but Dave Hackstall as well. There were some questions last year about his effectiveness in the system that he's running, and we're just going to have to see if that changes. What are the adjustments? And I would bet that he has a pretty short leash here in Season 2. Ron Francis isn't going to wait around for Dave Hackstall to catch up to these young guys and get things working the right way. So a really nice bit of work there by Ron Francis and the team there in the offseason, putting together some great maneuvers to improve the team. I think the offense is going to be a heck of a lot better than it was last year. Defense, we'll have to see. We can talk about that a little bit here once we get into the prediction side of this video. But Bjorkstrand, one of the more underrated players in the NHL, and Burakovsky coming over, that snipe, that elite finisher, and Stanley Cup winner now experience is huge on a young team like Seattle. Also, I wanted to talk real quick about Travis Yost. He put out a report that the Kraken have some pretty elite talent at the left wing now, stacking it up. Not only do they have wing talent, they've got center talent. I mean, remember, we've got Matty Beniers, Yanni Gourde, now Shane Wright down the middle, and I think those are some really good pieces to build around. So if you look at the report here, the way he explains it, the top three there in the elite tier with left wing depth are the Florida Panthers, Seattle Kraken, and St. Louis Blues. They have very deep offensive firepower and very few holes at the left wing position. He states that not a single winger on the list figures to be replacement level caliber or below. So that means these are really good wings that we've got on the left side for Seattle. Yost echoes that the Oliver Bjorkstrand trade for such a minimal cost was basically larceny and complete robbery. He says that he would argue that the Kraken have the deepest left wing position in terms of skill across all 32 teams. So some huge complimentary notes there from Travis Yost. I would encourage you to go look at that report. I'm going to leave links to all these things in the description down below, to this report, to the JFresh hockey cards, and some of the other things coming here a little bit later in the video. So just to re-highlight, I want to take a look at the Kraken roster on the last night of the regular season versus where it's projected now heading into the second season. If we look at the lineup, you start off with, on the left side there, you've got the 21-22. Again, that's the last game of the season, and we can see now the guys that have left. We're going to see Cholowski gone, Hayden Fleury is also gone, Daniel Pouliot is gone, Victor Rask is gone, and Riley Sheahan is likely gone. I think he's still a free agent at this point. We'll see, but I don't think he's going to be back with the Kraken unless I'm reading the tea leaves wrong on that. You also have Daniel Sprong exiting. He had some great moments for the Kraken there in year one, but he is not going to figure back into the lineup this year. He's a free agent, I believe. So coming into the lineup now for the Kraken, again, Oliver Bjorkstrand coming over. Can't wait to see him play. Andre Burakovsky coming over from Colorado. You've got John Hayden, a depth forward, a tough guy. Definitely not going to be afraid to mix things up when it's needed. You also have Justin Schultz coming over to help solidify the defensive depth a little bit. I would figure to see him in the lineup most nights. We'll kind of see how that goes and who may step up in training camp and take a spot away here or there. We'll just have to see what happens. So don't forget about Brandon Tanev, of course, coming back off of IR, that ACL injury that sidelined him for most of the year last year. He had some great moments for the Kraken in Season 1, and everybody is excited to see Brandon Tanev back on the ice for the Kraken. So figure him into the lineup on pretty much every night. Again, we have that huge amount of forward depth now going into Season 2, which is great to see. Of course, don't forget Shane Wright. He's coming into the lineup probably, I think, in year one. I don't think he's going back down for another developmental year. Can't wait to see him play for the Kraken and all the talent that he's going to bring. And as he develops and the team develops around him, it's going to be really amazing to have a superstar waiting in the wings like Shane Wright alongside Matty Beniers. These young guys will carry us for years into the future, and it's going to be a really fun ride to watch these guys develop. On the flip side of things, you have Chris Driedger heading to IR. He had that knee injury in the offseason, and so hopefully he can get better, but he's going to miss most of the year, if not the whole year. And we've got Martin Jones coming in to fill in for him, and possibly Joey Diacord coming up as the backup goaltender. So there's the quick look there of guys that are gone now from the last night of the regular season to kind of where we're at projected for this fall and the opening night roster for your Kraken. So here's a quick look, courtesy of Daily Faceoff. Great website. I'll leave a link down in the description for you guys. These change on a regular basis. I don't know how dialed in this one is for the Kraken specifically. I don't see Shane Wright on there, and some of the other pieces I'm not too sure about, but it's a great resource for checking out the lineups, and I love the little the sweater icons there. So there's a look at the Kraken's projected forward lines. You can also see the defensive lineup there. Looks like that's pretty close. You got Vince Dunn with Larson, Alexiak, possibly Schultz there on his right side, Soucy and Borgen. And then, of course, your goalie, Philip Grubauer, backed up by Martin Jones this year. And we'll have to see if Joey Diacord rotates in there and spells Martin Jones in the backup position. I don't know. We'll see how that goes and where Joey ends up, but probably Joey going to spend most of the year down in Coachella Valley. So now kind of getting back and refocusing, the question of the video was, can the Kraken make the playoffs? I think with a lot of the roster changes, they're going to have a chance to make some noise. But really, when you look at the standings from last year, they were about 20 wins out of playoff contention, even just for the wild card, and maybe even 23 to 25 wins to challenge for a divisional top 3 spot. So the question is how do you do that? First of all, you need to add some goal scoring, which they did. I think that the goaltending is going to have to be quite a bit better, and I would expect that it is as the defense kind of restructures a little bit heading into season 2 and settles. I think the more experience that those guys have on the back end with each other and how they're complementing with the forward group should make things go a little bit better. I would expect to see fewer gaffes and turnovers in their own end. At least I would hope that's the case as we go into season 2. But we also have to consider, how many games did the Kraken lose by 1 goal last year? 15 games. So even if you can cut that in half, lose 8 games by 1 goal, you've just added 8 wins to that total. So some of the guys you brought in, they're going to be worth a couple of wins over replacement. And if you can cut your 1 goal losses in half, you're right around an additional 12 to 15 wins, getting you a little bit closer to that 20 win goal that I think the Kraken need to try to get to if they're going to make the playoffs. It seems a little bit unrealistic to add 20 wins year over year, but I suppose it's possible. I think you can kind of figure out where I'm hedging as far as my prediction goes. But before we get too far, we also have to look at what our divisional opponents did here in the Pacific Division to be able to really understand whether the Kraken have a chance to make up that number of wins like we're talking about. We've seen a lot of guys leave the division and go to other places. We've seen a lot of transaction. We've got a lot of teams that are kind of up and coming, building, and maybe some teams that are going to take some steps backwards. So let's go through the division. I want to look at the transactions, and then I also want to look at the salary cap situation where it stands right now. So let's start at the top here, the very obvious team that had some big changes, the Calgary Flames. They did win the division last year. However, they lost Johnny Gaudreau to free agency. He went to Columbus. Matthew Tkachuk decided he did not want to be in Calgary long term and sign a contract extension there, so he was traded to the Florida Panthers. They brought back Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar, so a pretty good exchange there for the Calgary Flames to make up some ground as far as points being lost out of their lineup. Huberdeau had 115 points last year, so that's basically the equivalent of Johnny Gaudreau there, who also had 115 points exiting the Flames. It's going to be interesting to see how Huberdeau does as he slots in likely on the line there with Lindholm. Should be a lot of fun to see those guys kind of develop their talents together, replacing Johnny Gaudreau. So a very transitional type of year for the Flames, losing some key cornerstone pieces to their franchise. So a pretty big gut punch to the fans there in Calgary, losing 2 guys that had career seasons last year. Tkachuk had 42 goals, 62 assists for 104 points, but they are bringing Huberdeau back with 30 goals he had last year and a league best 85 assists. He had 115 points total for the Florida Panthers last year. So maybe a little bit of ease to the pain for the Calgary Flames there. So we'll have to see what happens. I don't know if Calgary is going to be able to maintain their spot atop the Pacific, but I don't think they're going to be a bad team or take too many steps backward this year. I do think they still are a playoff team, and Daryl Sutter is definitely capable of leading a team in the right direction through some pretty volatile changes and some dynamic things that have happened with the lineup there into this next season. So let's take a quick look at the Calgary Flames transactions through the offseason here. Of course, you had Calle Jarnkrok leave for Toronto, the former Seattle Kraken, so best of luck to Calle. And then the huge news there with Johnny Gaudreau broke. He signed with Columbus in free agency on that huge deal there. Can't wait to see how Johnny does in a new market with a new team. A bit of good news here for Calgary. Nikita Zadorov signed a 2-year, $7.5 million deal to stay in Calgary. He is a pretty big stalwart on the back end there for Calgary, great defenseman and very physical player. Of course, that next big transaction, Matthew Tkachuk traded to the Florida Panthers. Again, they were able to bring Jonathan Huberdeau back, Mackenzie Weegar. Cole Schwindt was also part of that deal. So a huge maneuver there for them to be able to offload Tkachuk, who did not want to stay long-term, and bring some key pieces back for the Flames. They also were able to sign Oliver Kylington on a 2-year, $5 million deal. Also, in the last few days here, you just saw Andrew Mangiapane sign that 3-year, $17.4 million deal, kind of re-solidifying the forward group there. And then Huberdeau signed that massive extension just a couple of days ago, 8 years, $84 million for the Flames. So he's going to be around in Calgary for a long time. So that's kind of how things shape up for Calgary. Like I said, I think they are going to probably fall off a little bit, but I think they are still going to be a good team. They did about as good as they could, replacing some of those points going out the door, bringing back Jonathan Huberdeau, a really elite talent in the league. Going to be interesting to see how he slots into the lineup and how that chemistry develops. So a quick look at the projected lineups there for Calgary. Again, it's very early. This, of course, courtesy, once again, from Daily Faceoff. Like I said earlier, I'm going to leave links in the description to all of these. You can see Lindholm would be centering that new Jonathan Huberdeau line, possibly Tyler Toffoli on the right side there. Michael Backlund, Sean Monahan coming back from injury there down the middle. Milan Lucic probably bouncing around third and fourth line minutes. We'll have to see where he ends up. You can look at the defensive pairings there, and the goalies, Jacob Markstrom going for the Flames. So a quick look at their projected lineup. Again, it's very early. Take most of this with a grain of salt. Things change, and that's what is great about this website. They do update the lineups pretty regularly, and gives you a pretty good look at depth chart and who they think is going to rotate in as things evolve on the rosters. Next up, we've got the Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Jay Woodcroft now going to be back with the team into the future. Let's be honest, really the thing lacking up there was goaltending. Mike Smith was kind of all over the place throughout the playoffs, and they ended up being swept there by the Colorado Avalanche in the conference finals. So what do the Oilers do? They go get a goaltender. They bring in Jack Campbell from Toronto, so that was a huge move for them. They were really up and down a lot, I thought, through the regular season last year, and they did kind of hit the stride going into the playoffs, but they ran into that brick wall against Colorado. I thought maybe if their goaltending had been a little bit better, and maybe the team played a little bit better in front of Mike Smith, they could have gotten through or at least won a couple of games against Colorado, but it just did not happen for them last year. So the Oilers kind of came up short there. I think this next season they will be able to do some pretty extensive damage in the Pacific Division with some better goaltending and just a re-solidified roster in general. It sounds like Mike Smith is going to miss the whole year. Injuries piled up, so they brought in the new goalie Jack Campbell and put a new backup in behind him because they also lost Koskinen. So let's go through the transactions. First of all, you had Archibald leaving. He signed with the Pittsburgh Penguins. You also had the big trade there, Zach Cassian going down to Arizona, picks being exchanged as well in that trade. Everybody's favorite guy, right? Evander Kane signs a 4-year, $20.5 million contract, so he's going to be in Edmonton for the foreseeable future, or at least until the next controversy with him happens. Guess we'll have to see how that goes. Again, Jack Campbell signed that 5-year, $25 million deal, and so he's going to try to solidify the goaltending on the Oilers. I think that is the key to this whole team, and obviously been the piece lacking up till now. Some additional signings here. You had Brett Kulak re-signing with Edmonton there on a 4-year, $11 million deal. Greg McKegg on a 2-year, 2-way. Calvin Pickard comes in. He's probably going to be more of a depth goaltender. From Vegas, Matthias Janmark comes over on a 1-year, $1.25 million deal. And then you had Jesse Puljujarvi with that 1-year, $3 million deal, signing there at the end of July. And of course, rounding things out, Kyler Yamamoto signs a 2-year deal for $6.2 million with the Oilers, kind of solidifying their forward depth and just getting things set just right, as I believe they are going to be a dominant team again this next year. I feel like Connor McDavid is taking that next step forward. That determination is there, and he's surrounded by a pretty good cast. Whether you like him or not, with Evander Kane, he is there. He's a great scorer. He's good for 30 goals. And then you've got Leon Draisaitl as usual. He's going to be coming back, making all sorts of noise for the Oilers on offense. And now they will be backstopped by a pretty decent goaltender in Jack Campbell. Definitely improvement over Mike Smith, I would believe, heading into this next season. I think Jay Woodcroft is a great up-and-coming coach. He's done a good job with the Oilers up to this point. I feel like he has a good rapport with the team and the fans there, which is also important. And I feel like the systems he has put in place there are being executed pretty well by the players, and I think they can continue that momentum going into the next season. Oilers are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Mark my words. So the Oilers overall have a pretty stacked lineup. We can take a quick look at the projected lineups. According to Daily Faceoff there, you've got Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl down the middle. Those two guys are unbelievable talents. They're going to be flanked by impressive winger Kyler Yamamoto, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and of course Evander Kane. So a pretty deep lineup and some key additions as the Oilers look to grab that top spot in the Pacific. Of course, their defensive pairings, you've got Darnell Nurse, great tough player on the back end there, Brett Kulak, Tyson Barrie, and Jack Campbell, the big addition there at goal, coming in, trying to backstop these Oilers to a little bit more consistency in the net. Next up, we go down to California, the Los Angeles Kings. They surprised a lot of people, made it into the playoffs, kind of knocked Vegas back a rung. They did it without Drew Doughty, who was injured down the last stretch of the season there for them, so they've got some great young guys coming up, and I think they've got a good shot of challenging the top three in the division again, maybe even jumping up even higher than that, but we'll have to see how things go. Sometimes with these younger teams, you take a couple of steps forward and then a couple of steps backward. We did see that with Calgary back a few years ago when Johnny Gaudreau was kind of getting into his prime, but we'll have to see how things go. I think the question mark may be goaltending. Jonathan Quick getting a little bit older. We'll have to see how that goes. But again, Drew Doughty coming back is a huge bonus for this Kings team as we go into the 22-23 season. We'll have to see how they do in the Pacific and if they can keep up this momentum and their upward trajectory in the Pacific Division. They did make some good moves in the offseason, Kevin Fiala being one of them. We'll talk about that in just a second. But they have a deep pool of prospects, and they're no longer a tomorrow type of team. They are a today team, and they showed that to us this last year, and I think they're going to keep doing that. A lot of the extensions and transactions that we'll talk about here were shorter term, 2-year, 1 year, so it keeps them on a short-term horizon for turning over players that are working or not working. So I really like how LA is built, and really would expect them to continue to have success, even if it's not a huge jump forward this year. I do like how this team is built. So let's talk about their transactions. Of course, you had Dustin Brown retiring, so best of luck to him in the future. He was a tough and tumble player, great scorer, really good years for the Kings throughout his career, and a lot of fun to watch him. The big move for the Kings, obviously, was the Kevin Fiala acquisition from the Minnesota Wild. They sent a first-round pick and Brock Faber over to the Minnesota team to get Kevin Fiala's talents down into Los Angeles. He's going to be a great scorer, a great offensive punch. That's kind of an area the Kings have lacked, is that offensive scoring power, and so that's an area they're trying to improve. Bring in a guy, but also let the younger guys develop around him as they go. Kings also signed Adrian Kempe on a 4-year, $22 million extension. So that's a good key piece to keep around into the future. All the rest of them were shorter term deals. Carl Grundstrom, 2-year, $2.6 million. You had Elias Anderson with a 1-year, $750K. Alexander Edler, he's going to be on a 1-year, $750K deal as well. And then the younger guy, Brendan Lemieux, Claude Lemieux's son, he signed that 1-year deal, $1.35 million. So some of these shorter term contracts, similar to the Kraken, maybe some prove-it deals out there. Have to see where these guys end up at the end of the season. They also extended Velarde on a 1-year, $850K contract, and Jared Anderson Dolan also on a 1-year, $750K. So that's kind of where the Kings are at. Like I said, I think that they're going to continue that upward trajectory, but I don't know if they're there just yet as far as challenging for the division. So we can take another glimpse here at the projected lineups. Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar, Kevin Fiala, potentially that top first line for the Kings. That could be a pretty dangerous line if they get rolling. You've got Deneau, Moore, and Arvidsson down there on the second line. So pretty good mix of veteran guys and young guys on this Kings lineup. I'm really excited to see how this team develops from here and how they do in this season, trying to follow up that playoff entry that was kind of a surprise for a lot of people. Drew Doughty coming back, of course, on defense. And then in goal, Jonathan Quick. He's been there a while. He's starting to maybe slow down, but we'll see what happens back there. He's always a fierce competitor, and then you've got Cal Peterson as the backup. Just a few miles away, the Anaheim Ducks, also a similar situation for them. Ryan Getzlaf retiring, similar to Dustin Brown, so best of luck to him as well. I would expect to see Getzlaf probably on some broadcasts. He's a great, fun personality, a lot of good stories from him over the years from the Pacific Division and those California teams. I remember those battles between the Sharks, the Ducks, and the Kings over the years. Really cool stuff, and Getzlaf was always a huge part of that, so best of luck to him. The Ducks also making some maneuvers here. They brought in some vets to surround some of the young guys And again, a team that has that upward trajectory. I think they're a few years away, maybe a couple years away, but they do have some extremely elite talent in the wings there waiting to come through and develop. So the Ducks, with their acquisitions and free agency, they brought in Frank Vatrano, a 3-year, $10.95 million deal. Frank Vatrano has an absolute rocket of a shot. I really like watching him. Watched him play for Florida before he moved over to New York there. And they also brought in Ryan Strome. 5-year deal, $25 million contract for the Ducks. So those guys are going to be around for a while as the younger core starts to develop. Both of those guys coming over from the Rangers last year and great players. Ducks also signed Isaac Lundstrom to a 2-year, $3.6 million deal. Nathan Gaucher, their draft pick there, entry-level deal, 3-year entry-level contract, of course. And then the big news the other day, John Klingberg comes in on a 1-year, $7 million deal to Anaheim. Klingberg had been rumored to Seattle here and there, but that never materialized, so the Ducks snag him on a 1-year deal at $7 million. Ducks, again, I don't think they're quite there yet. They may contend for the playoffs, but I don't think they're a top 3 divisional team. It's going to be interesting to see if they can push forward a little bit and challenge for the wild card this year. I do like the makeup of that team, but again, it's developing. You have to see where these young guys go as we move forward into their future as well. So the Ducks going to field a pretty interesting lineup here. You've got Trevor Zegras and Ryan Strome down the middle, the new guy. Ryan Strome coming over from the New York Rangers. Frank Vatrano is going to probably set up alongside his wing on the right side. You've got Henrique, Troy Terry. A pretty good lineup there, a mix of younger and older guys as they develop. Look at their defensive pairings, Cam Fowler and Drysdale. Klingberg, the new guy coming in from free agency, so we'll see how he fits in. And of course, John Gibson back there in goal for the Ducks. A pretty good lineup, and we're going to have to see how this team, the young, makeup of it, blends with some of the veterans they've brought in and how they develop as we go forward. For our rivals to the north, the Vancouver Canucks, kind of an interesting offseason. A lot of things up in the air a little bit. That JT Miller possible extension coming. It's looming over the organization a little bit. They did have that coaching change last year. Bruce Boudreau is now the guy in charge at the bench there. But we have to see how things rebound for the Canucks. I don't think that they had the year that they wanted. Brock Besser, back on an extension, had a tough year, went through a lot of things. So you hope that he bounces back. All the best to him. And so you're just going to have to see. I feel like the Canucks definitely had the Kraken's number last season. They won all of the games. I don't feel like the rivalry materialized like maybe we thought it would, but I think maybe that's going to change this year. I feel like the Kraken are going to give the Canucks a little bit more adversity to deal with. They're going to be a tougher team to play against, and maybe we will see that rivalry start to materialize here in the Kraken's second season. So the first thing there, the funny draft pick, Peterson and Peterson, so now they have two, same but different, so that was kind of fun to see that happen. Going through the transactions there, we've got Jack Rathbone on a 2-year one-way deal, $1.7 million for the Canucks. They also extended Brock Besser on a 3-year, $6.65 million deal. And again, really hope for him to have a bounce-back year as a person, not so much as a rival, but you don't like to see people going through some tough stuff in their life. So all the best to him. He's a fun guy to watch, and I can't wait to see his game rebound this next season. The Canucks also bring in Curtis Lazar there from the Boston Bruins, 3-year, $3 million deal. So it's going to be interesting to see him and what he can add to their lineup. They also signed Ilya Mikheyev on a 4-year, $19 million deal. Not a name that pops to the top of your head for a lot of people outside of the West Coast in the Vancouver area, but a very key piece for the Canucks and younger type talent that I think is going to propel them forward if things can settle the right way for Bruce Boudreau and the structure that he wants to put in and the ingredients that the Canucks have. I think if they can just find the right consistency, they can be a good team that challenges for the playoffs. But I do feel like this is a team that can go either way at this point. And if the JT Miller extension doesn't go through, that could be a really big signal to the group in general that maybe this team isn't going to take that step forward, and we'll have to see what happens from there. A couple of other signings. Dakota Joshua comes over on a 2-year contract, and Phil DiGiuseppe, I don't know if I said that right, but he signed a 1-year, 2-way contract. So some of the depth signings there for the Canucks as they move forward. Like I said, I would like to see that rivalry with the Kraken start to develop. Sometimes it takes a playoff series for that to happen, but the Canucks position pretty good. I feel like they're treading water at this point, and they need to decide if they're going to really double down and move forward and take those next steps in their development to become a playoff team and get back to the top of the division. Otherwise, things could start to fall back, and maybe they have to offload some guys. Again, a huge thing looming over that franchise right now is that JT Miller extension. Have to see if he's going to sign it, or maybe he gets traded for pieces. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So we'll take a quick peek again here. The lineups, courtesy of Daily Faceoff. Again, I'm going to leave those links in the description. You can go check all this stuff out after the video if you want to. Top line there, hopefully JT Miller, Brock Besser, Elias Peterson. So pretty stacked there on the top line if they get clicking. And then you've got the captain, Bo Horvat, on the second line, centering Garland and Kuzmenko. So a pretty interesting lineup. You've got Curtis Lazar coming in now as a free agent, Tanner Pearson in there. So a pretty good mix there for Vancouver. We'll have to see how things go. I'm not completely sold on this team, but we'll see. Quinn Hughes on the back end there, Luke Shin, Tyler Myers, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, all pretty good defensemen. They move the puck well, and I don't know. Well, it's a prove it year for me with Vancouver. Thatcher Demko in goal. He is usually their savior. Pretty impressive stuff from him. So we'll see what happens with the Canucks moving forward. We keep moving here. One of the teams that I think, unfortunately, may take a huge step backwards are the San Jose Sharks. They do have a new general manager, Mike Grier, coming in. Congrats to him. He was a lot of fun to watch back in the day, and I think he's going to be a great general manager for that organization. They also have a new coach in David Quinn, but they're kind of entering this transitional period. Got the new regime. They've got a lot of contracts on the books. They did have to send Brent Burns out of town. And maybe you wonder if things go off the rails a little bit, maybe some additional pieces are going to get moved from this franchise. We'll have to see what happens, but we'll just kind of have to see how the Sharks start out. I thought they had a good start last year. Maybe it was a little bit of smoke and mirrors, and then things kind of got bad from there. They ended up towards the bottom of the division, missed the playoffs by a pretty wide margin. They do have a pretty good forward group. I would think that their depth isn't exactly where they want it to be, but the goaltending this year should be a little bit better, I think, with the complimentary James Reimer, and then you also have Kaapo Kähkönen, who also signed a deal. He's going to be in net there for the Sharks. So we'll have to see what happens. Like I said, I do think the Sharks are going to take some steps backward this year, and you will probably see some pieces moved as they try to rebuild this organization and move themselves into the future. So again, the big news, Mike Grier, David Quinn coming in at the helm now. They also acquired Luke Kunin from the Nashville Predators. They sent John Leonard, their former draft pick there, out of town. Luke Kunin then signed a 2-year, $5.5 million deal with the Sharks to stay there for a couple years into the future. Some other transactions, you had Oscar Lindblom. He signed a 2-year, $5 million deal in free agency. Matt Benning, he joined the Sharks there on a 4-year deal, $5 million contract. Some depth signings, you had Marcus Nudavara. He's going to sign that 1-year, $1.5 million deal for San Jose. You had Nico Sturm signing a 3-year, $6 million deal, so he'll be there a little bit longer term. And of course, the big news for the Sharks in the offseason, they sent everybody's favorite bearded beauty, Brent Burns. He went out to Carolina. They traded him and Lane Peterson over for Steven Lorentz and Makaniemi and a conditional pick. So it's going to be interesting to see how Brent Burns fits into the Carolina lineup. I think he's got some good years left in him for sure. An amazing skater, an amazing passer, just an elite defenseman, kind of waning into the later part of his career, but former Norris Trophy winner and a lot of fun to watch. So it's going to be exciting to see what he adds to the Carolina Hurricanes lineup. All the best to Brent Burns. That does leave a pretty big hole on the Sharks blue line, so we'll have to see how they fill that in, which guys are going to rotate through and what sticks. But moving on, we had Kaapo Kähkönen sign that 2-year, $5.5 million deal to stay with the Sharks for a couple more years. Steven Lorentz signed the 2-year extension. And then just recently, Mario Ferraro, great guy, great leader, and great young defenseman there for the Sharks. 4-year, $13 million deal, so they've committed to him a little bit longer term. But again, the Sharks trying to get through this transitional period. They've been, that franchise that was so close for many, many years, 15 years running, they had made the playoffs, and now they've got to rebuild, restructure, and see what pieces are going to come along the ride into the future. Like I said, I think there are some questions with Logan Couture. I think, if things go off the rails, he's probably going to be a piece that gets moved, maybe a chance to go chase a cup somewhere for him or just adjust to a different situation as the Sharks continue to rebuild. Timo Meyer's been rumored in the past, Kevin Labanc, all these guys are kind of out there as far as trade rumors go at different times throughout these last couple of seasons. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I do feel like the Sharks are going to take the biggest step backward this year heading into the 22-23 season. So we get a quick glimpse at the Sharks' projected lineup here. Again, like I said, I'm going to leave these links in the description so you can check it out too. Of course, you've got Tomas Hertl there. He signed that extension a little bit earlier in the spring, an 8-year deal, I believe. Logan Couture down the middle. Nick Bonino, he played well for the Sharks. Nothing too amazing, but, consistent. Young guy Alex Barabanov on the wing there. Timo Meier, Kevin LeBanc, Oscar Lindblom, one of the new guys coming in. So we'll have to see how these guys shape up and who notches into what matchup and line pairing for the Sharks as we go forward. Wouldn't be surprised to see Eklund, their young guy prospect, come up. They drafted him 2 years ago. Maybe he'll draw into the lineup throughout the season. We'll just have to see. On the back end, obviously the big change. Brent Burns is gone, but you've got Mario Ferraro. Erik Karlsson, of course, the smooth skating guy. He's kind of getting towards the tail end of his career, but he's been impressive. Mark-Edward Vlasic slowing down a little bit. Going to have to see how he does this year. And in goal, a little bit of a different look with Kaapo Kakkonen and James Reimer now as the Sharks look to try to rebound, try to stay consistent, but I just don't see this lineup getting a whole lot done in the Pacific. Last but not least, our rivals to the south, the Vegas Golden Knights, just absolutely decimated by injury last year. They ended up getting their coach, Pete DeBoer, fired. They missed the playoffs for the first time in their franchise history, and it was just not a good year. There was some cap manipulation, I think, going on as far as moving players in and out of the lineup. You see that, with a lot of teams that are cap-strapped, so it's not anything new, but it was definitely happening, I think. But I do expect Vegas to have a big bounce-back year. I think that Jack Eichel being healthy, Bruce Cassidy providing that new structure, that new energy into the locker room and the players should send things in a positive direction for the Golden Knights. They didn't have a huge amount of roster churn, but they did send Max Pacioretty out of town to try to get a little bit on the other side of their cap situation and create some space for signing some of the younger guys. So let's go through those transactions real quick here. They did sign Riley Smith to a 3-year, $15 million deal. They then sent Max Pacioretty over to the Hurricanes. Again, Brent Burns, Max Pacioretty. So you're seeing two guys from the Pacific Division go over to Carolina. So Pacioretty and Dylan Coughlin going from the Vegas Golden Knights over to the Hurricanes. They just got future considerations back. That's how strapped they are. They couldn't take any more player contracts on in order to sign some of their younger guys. You did see that Kelly McCrimmon came out after that, kind of explaining why they moved Pacioretty, and he stuck true to what he said. They then went on to sign some of their younger depth-type players. They brought Howden in on a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. You had Ronberg for a 3-year contract worth $2.3 million. Rim Paul signed a 2-year, 2-way contract. Brazy signed a 2-year, 2-way. You had Hutchinson on a 1-year, 2-way. Mannanen signed a 1-year, $750K contract. And then to round things out, both Spencer Fuo and Braden Pachal on a 1-year contract, staying with the Golden Knights. So this team, for me, it's really all about Mark Stone. Which version is going to show up, and can he stay healthy? He is an elite talent, elite scorer. He plays great defensively. He plays great offensively, great puck handler, physical guy, and just really energizes that team. I feel like it's kind of on his shoulders at times. I think the goaltending also has to be consistent. Robin Leonard can be great, but sometimes he's struggled a little bit here and there. And we do know that he was dealing with injuries last year. So we'll see how he rebounds, how Mark Stone does. Can the team stay healthy? And can Jack Eichel step up into the spotlight and also contribute to this Vegas Golden Knights lineup? So we'll have to see how things go. I do think, personally for me, I think Vegas is going to bounce back. And they're going to be in the top 3 in the division. So once again, let's take a quick look at that projected lineup, courtesy of Daily Faceoff. You've got Jack Eichel coming back healthy, William Karlsson, Nolan Patrick potentially down the middle. We'll have to see. I've read a couple of different things over on Twitter and some of the reports. So this doesn't line up exactly with what I've seen out of some of the people that are covering Vegas a little bit closer. But like I said, this website changes quite a bit. Of course, you've got Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith on the wings, Mark Stone, a huge piece of this lineup, and we'll have to see how things go for Vegas as they try to bounce back and get back into the playoffs. Pietrangelo on defense, Shea Theodore, Zach Whitecloud, Braden McNabb, Alec Martinez. These guys are, Nicholas Hague, don't want to leave him out. Those are some pretty talented defensemen on the back end. And of course, Robin Leonard in goal. We'll have to see how he does trying to bounce back from injury. and stay healthy for the Vegas Golden Knights. So that's my look around the Pacific Division, all the transactions and changes that have happened here out west, some pretty big organizational changes and some pretty big name players heading out of the division as everyone tries to maneuver for that next step up in the standings. Let's take a quick look at the projected cap space. As of today, you've got the Anaheim Ducks with right around $18.8 million of projected cap space, so that's going to be huge for them to make adjustments on the fly throughout the season if things don't go exactly the way they want. You've got the Calgary Flames now with $8.4 million in cap space, so that's going to be big for them to also make some adjustments or acquisitions throughout the season. Oilers are a little bit over the cap, it looks like, right around $3 million over, so we'll have to see what changes they make to get cap compliant. Again, this is just projected cap space. Lots of things can change. It's only early August, so we'll see where we go from here. The Kings have right around $4 million in cap space. Sharks right in the mid-threes there, 3.6 after moving Brent Burns off of their roster and out to Carolina. Your Seattle Kraken, they have right around $2 million in projected cap space, so they do have some flexibility, and they also have those shorter-term contracts like I was talking about, so it'll be a whole nother picture that comes into play next offseason. Don't get too worried about that number right now. I think they're doing what they need to do with their cap space, and they're going to have plenty of room to maneuver in the future. Then you have the Vancouver Canucks. They're over the cap just a little bit, so we're going to probably see some adjustments there. You do want to get JT Miller locked up on an extension, so you might have to see some pieces move for that to happen. We'll just have to see. Again, the Canucks, one of those teams that I think are just kind of in that in-between state. I'm not sure if they're going to jump forward or move backward this next season. Vegas Golden Knights, of course, they are cap-strapped as well. We know their problems all too well with their salary situation. Max Pacioretty being the latest casualty. They're having to send him out of town to create some room to sign some of the younger guys. So that's a look at the projected cap space in the Pacific Division. Again, the Anaheim Ducks have the most room to negotiate and maneuver there with $18.8 million projected. So with all of that said, we have finally reached the point of the video where I want to provide you guys with my predictions for the Pacific Division and also answer that question, can the Seattle Kraken make the playoffs in their second season? And while I think it is a possibility, the answer for me is no, the Kraken are not going to make the playoffs in their second season. And here's why. You have to find 20 to 23 wins. And while I think some teams are going to take steps backwards in the Pacific Division, I don't think enough teams in front of the Kraken are going to do so to allow them to bubble up to the top. I do think that the Kraken are going to win an additional 12 games this year, maybe 15, but I think 20 is a little bit of a stretch until we solidify things on the back end, until I've seen some improved goaltending and just overall better movement out of the defensive zone, better special teams. I just don't think that the Kraken are there yet. They will hopefully be a 500 team, but again, that's not enough to crack the playoffs in the NHL. So there you have it. That's my answer to the question, can the Kraken make the playoffs? Well, of course they can, but they won't. They're not going to make the playoffs in year 2. I would love to hear your guys' response to that. What do you think is going to happen with the Kraken? Do you think they can add an additional 20 to 23 wins to get up there in the playoff picture? I would love to hear your justification and rationale in the comments, so hit me up. Let me know what you guys are thinking, and we can talk about it here in a live stream real soon. So in addition to that answer, I also wanted to provide my Pacific Division predictions for you guys, where I think teams are going to finish top to bottom. I would love to hear your guys' order as well. So again, in the comments, go ahead and list your teams top to bottom, 1 through 8. Who do you think is going to finish at the top of the Pacific? Would love to hear about it. So here's my prediction. I've got Edmonton on top. I see Calgary taking a step back, but still maintaining, finishing in second place there. I do see Vegas with a bounce back year. They're going to finish in third in the Pacific. I like Los Angeles, but I feel like the youngsters are going to be a little bit inconsistent as they try to develop here and maybe take a little bit of a step back in this next season. But I do think it's going to be a pretty big fight between Vegas and Los Angeles for that third spot in the division. Anaheim going to take some steps forward, but they're still just not there yet. Vancouver, I just don't know about. I don't feel like they are headed on a course that is definite just yet at this point, so we'll have to see how they do. I do see Seattle with some improvement, but not enough to jump up too many rungs in the standings. They're going to finish ahead of the San Jose Sharks, who I think are going to take the biggest step backwards in the division this year. So there's my predictions. There's my answers. That's what I've got for you guys today. Again, I would love to hear from you guys and what you think is going to happen out west this next season. So guys, I do want to thank you again for dropping by the channel for today's update. If you want to hit that like button, I would really appreciate it. And of course, if you want to hit that subscribe button and turn on alerts, then you'll know when I'm going live here in the upcoming days. We can talk a little bit more about this. I do appreciate all the support, and it's been a lot of fun to put this one together. I may have missed some transactions here or there, but I tried to do a pretty good rundown of everything that I've seen happen throughout the course of the offseason. I think we have a lot of things to look forward to in Seattle in this next Kraken season. I don't think they're a playoff team yet, like I said, but there's a lot of things that are bright on the horizon for this Kraken team, and I can't wait to see it play out and have you guys along for the ride. So just a little bit of a reminder, I do like to do my post-game rapid reaction shows throughout the season. I started late last year, but I want to try to do as many as I can here through the next season. I do those live, so if you want to tune in for those and chat with me after the game, that's great. I also do a morning cup of Kraken show on the weekends, usually like Saturday, sometimes live, sometimes pre-recorded, so keep an eye out for that. And I've got regular updates coming to you guys over on Twitter and on YouTube here. So again, hit subscribe, hit that follow button over on Twitter. I appreciate the support. I love to retweet everything that you guys are sending to me, and just to amplify the community and the Kraken and everything going on here in the Seattle markets. So thanks again, guys. It's been a lot of fun putting this one together. We'll talk to you again real soon right here at Sasquatch NHL. Have a great day.